What is distortion? This is such a blanket term that I figure it made sense to clarify this once and for all, especially since JST has released a distortion box. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Anyways, what's up guys? Miami here with JST, and we're going to be breaking down the 10 different types of distortion. We're going to have plenty of examples this video, and we'll be showcasing the new JST Heat plugin where it's applicable, and where it's not, we'll be using some other JST products. We're still trying to hit 100,000 subscribers this year, and that would totally distort my reality, so hit that like, comment, and subscribe. I remember skip the intro and get straight to the info. It's really hard to argue with myself. Harmonic distortion. This is when harmonics are added to a sound that weren't originally there. Electronic components cause harmonic distortion. Amplifiers, instruments, even your voice. Pretty much anything that isn't a simplistic instrument or a sine wave. So let's take a guitar, which isn't a simple instrument by any means. You could play a note and hear the octave of it, or even other notes. Why is that? It's creating harmonic distortion by design, but this gets amplified by guitar amplifiers, preamps, etc. And the way that harmonic distortion works is in multiples. We love 440 Hz, right? So let's use this for the example. 440 Hz is A4. If you were to play it on guitar through a tube amp, you would get even order harmonics, which multiply by 2, 4, and 8. There would be a harmonic distortion at 880, and then again at 1760, and so on. If you were playing through a solid state amp, you would get odd order harmonics, which would multiply by 3, 5, and 7. If you want to go deep into the rabbit hole of even order and odd order harmonics, well, we have a couple videos that talk about this, one being the popular one, 5 EQ frequencies destroying your mix. So some terms that will help as we go through this are odd and even order harmonics, as well as soft and hard clipping. A lot of people don't think of clipping as distortion, but the way it alters a waveform, it couldn't really be described as anything else. Let's actually get clipping out of the way so we can get to the jun that everyone's actually here for, right? Clipping. Audio clipping is a type of distortion that occurs when the amplitude of a signal exceeds the maximum limit of the system's dynamic range. In simpler terms, when the signal peak surpasses the capacity of the audio system, the waveform is clipped, resulting in a flattened appearance. I don't know how much simpler that was, but it's hard to explain this. This process introduces harmonic content to the signal that was not originally there, creating distortion. While clipping is often considered undesirable in certain contexts, such as clean audio reproduction, it's intentionally used in some musical genres and audio processing scenarios to get you specific sonic characteristics, right? The clipped waveform can impart a gritty or edgy quality, altering the perceived timbre and adding a unique flavor to the sound. Therefore, audio clipping is a form of distortion, shaping the signal in a way that deviates from its original unaltered state. Here's an example of a clip signal before and after. Let's take a look at this visually as well to see what clipping is doing to the waveform. Now that we have that one fully out of the way, let's talk about saturation. This is something I have to deal with every time a new band drops into my Spotify algorithm that doesn't meet my standards of music production. Well, now let's talk about audio saturation. That's a form of soft clipping. Saturation is a combo of harmonic distortion and compression, and it enhances sonic characteristics by adding non-linearities to the audio signal. So, audio saturation basically adds rich overtones to the sound signal through overdriving of analog circuits or the application of saturation plugins or distortion plugins. Once again, it does this by soft clipping. Let's listen to an example of an audio signal being saturated. So if that's soft clipping, what is hard clipping? I don't know, man. My memory's getting a little fuzzy. What is fuzz distortion? Fuzz is such a ridiculous level of distortion that it was created accidentally by a broken mixer channel 60 years ago. It's the most aggressive form of distortion and the hardest level of clipping. This also means it's the most drastic use of odd harmonics when it comes to distortion. Mostly used for popular guitar effects, most notably the Big Muff, fuzz is an iconic distortion that pushes distortion to the limit. It's characterized by like a thick and buzzy sound. Let's take a listen to that and compare it to saturation. Now here's one that people don't talk about too often: aliasing distortion. Not to be confused with sample rate distortion, but aliasing distortion happens in audio when high frequency elements are improperly represented, and it kind of folds back into the audible range during digital processing. This occurs when frequencies exceed half of the sample rate. You can stop this by using anti-aliasing filters or oversampling techniques. If you have some spare time, you guys should look into the Nyquist frequency, but that's a whole different story. Let me try and make this a little simpler, right? All right. I want you to imagine trying to take a super clear photograph, but your camera isn't fast enough. Now, when you snap a pic, something moving really fast, it looks kind of weird, right? That weirdness is kind of like aliasing in audio, when high-pitched sounds get a bit confused and end up making weird noises because our equipment isn't catching all the details. So aliasing is like that blurry, unexpected side effect in your musical snapshot. Now let's listen to some audio before and after oversampling. This one can be a bit hard to hear if you aren't on a good system, but try to pay attention to the top end. Now onto our next one, phase distortion. Phase distortion is a type of audio distortion that occurs when the phase relationship of different frequency components in a signal is altered. Unlike harmonic distortion, which affects the amplitude of the frequency components, phase distortion changes the timing or the phase relationships between them. This can lead to alterations in the waveform shape, introducing some unique tonal characteristics to the sound. Not always good. In synthesizers, phase distortion synthesis is a technique where phase relationships of sine waves are manipulated to make a complex and evolving waveform. In other contexts, unintentional phase distortion occurs in audio systems all the time, and it really affects the fidelity of the sound. Overall, phase distortion plays a role in shaping the timbre and the characteristic of audio signals once again. Let's take a listen to what phase distortion sounds like. And we're going to talk about something that's not very popular: intermodulation. Intermodulation distortion is a type of audio distortion that occurs when two or more frequencies interact within an audio system, generating additional frequencies that aren't present in the original signals. And this results in non-linearities in the system, causing the mixing or modulation of frequencies. I hope you guys got a pen and paper out for this one, because this one's crazy. Getting into the detail of this stuff, I think this is why no one ever talks about it, but I wanted to break it all down. Now, when we all know, bitcrushing. Bitcrushing distorts audio by reducing the amount of information used to represent each sample, known as the bit depth. A lot of you guys probably knew this one. And this process introduces digital artifacts such as a gritty or crunchy texture, altering the smoothness of the sound and giving it somewhat of a lo-fi character. In essence, it's a deliberate form of distortion that adds a digital crunch to the audio. And of course, let's take a listen to some bitcrushing. We've done a lot of talking about non-linear distortion, so let's talk about one that isn't: linear distortion. An example of linear distortion is the intentional use of an EQ to adjust the amplitude of specific frequency bands in a linear manner. When you boost or cut certain frequencies using EQ, you're applying linear distortion to the signal. This process alters the tonal balance by modifying the amplitude of specific frequency components without introducing harmonics or non-linear artifacts. Linear distortion through EQ is used in audio mixing and mastering to shape the frequency response of instruments or the overall sound. And of course, our last one on the list, plain old distortion. What is that? Distortion is the altering or deformation of an audio signal's original waveform. So basically, everything. The blanket term for everything that I've listed, as well as anything that will ever happen in audio. But hopefully this breaks it down for all of you. I know a lot of this was a mouthful, pause on that, but I have to say that I wish I knew what each of these things were, and I wish I knew the appropriate terms for them. I hope these examples really helped you guys understand, and I also hope in this video you learned some of the power of JST Heat and what it's capable of. So make sure to check that out in the link below, and I will catch up with you fine people like I always do.